I knew things would change once I started at my new school. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and moving an hour away from the city would definitely require some adjustment. By adaptation, I meant that I would have to learn to live with it. At my father's request and my mother's insistence, I stayed out of trouble. The population was, to say the least, motley. A few Negroes, a few spies, a few Italians and Jews. The majority were hard-headed Dutchmen. They weren't Amish or Mennonites, just German Lutherans who dominated the neighborhood and everything in it. It was a melting pot, so I had no trouble fitting in, but I missed my Philadelphia friends. I stayed in the neighborhood after graduation, mostly to be close to my family. I still visited the old neighborhood regularly and kept in touch with old friends. I got my first job driving a fuel oil delivery truck. A few years later, I was already working inside, dispatching and taking orders. I had an aptitude for the business, and after a few years, I could already see myself owning a similar business. I had no trouble making friends of the opposite sex, and my social life worked out better than I expected. When I married, my mother was a little disappointed that my new wife was not Italian, but she did her best to accommodate Marcy without reservation. After the birth of my two children, Marcy insisted that I get a haircut. I didn't mind it, but as soon as the kids went to school, Marcy wanted to go to work. My father never thought a wife and mother should work. I'm not exactly sure what the rationale was, but in retrospect, I can say that it made sense. It wasn't that I minded Marcy working, but I didn't like her socializing with people she knew and grew up with. I liked some of her friends, but not all of them. In high school, she participated in all sorts of student activities, and she loved it. I avoided those activities and the people who did them. It always seemed to me like a bunch of snobs sitting around stroking each other's egos. I knew she was sexually active before we met, but so was I. We never discussed what we did before we were together. It wasn't a rule or anything, it just happened. We had been married for about 10 years when things started to fall apart. Marcy worked in the claims department of a local national insurance company. I became concerned when she started working overtime and weekends. 6 months later, I knew it was time to call it quits when a seminar said, "Tony, I just don't understand what the problem is. It's only for 3 days. I've already talked to your mom and she's agreed to stay with the kids while I'm gone. You'll be home in the evenings. I know you can cook for yourself." I couldn't believe she even had the nerve to ask that. "Who's going to this seminar?" She seemed to perk up a little when I answered. 6 girls from the department, Betty Klink from HR, and Rodney. I smiled when she said his name. I was amazed that she hadn't guessed that I knew all about her special lunches and late-night work meetings with her immediate boss, Rodney Foote. Rodney and Marcy had grown up together. He was one of those kids who belonged to every club and participated in every activity except sports when they were in high school. "Do you take me for a fool, Marcy? I don't understand. What are you talking about?" "I've known about you and Rodney for 6 months. If you think I'm going to let you go away with him for 3 days, you're out of your mind." "Tony, what are you talking about? Rodney is my boss. There's nothing between us. I would never think of cheating on you. You know that." I looked at the empty can of Budweiser in my hand and slowly rose from my chair. Walking toward the kitchen, I crumpled the thin aluminum in my hand and tossed it into the trash can. I missed, but I didn't bother picking it up. The new bucket made a hissing sound as I opened the lid and sat back down. Marcy just sat there waiting for me to respond. "You are the mother of my children, and as a mother you are doing a good job. The only reason I haven't kicked you out of the house is because of that. I talked to my mom and explained everything to her. She said that for the sake of the kids, I have to stay firm and hope you can handle it. If I leave you, the court will give you my children. I can't let that happen." "Did you tell your mother I was cheating on you?" "No. A woman from church told her. I just didn't deny it when she asked me about it." "You're not serious. I don't believe you. Why are you saying all this?" I took a big sip of beer and smiled. "Rodney lives at 321 David Drive. It's only 3 blocks from your office. You and your boss go there usually 3 times a week and stay there for almost 3 hours each time. What are you doing in his apartment for 3 hours? After you explain this to me, you can tell me about the overtime work you do in the office. Did you know that your cleaning lady at the office also goes to church with my mom?" Her eyes drooped and her lower lip quivered. "As long as you don't publicly embarrass me or my family, I won't do anything. If that changes, then all bets are off. You can leave or stay, but you will never take my boys away from me." She was definitely upset as she jumped to her feet. "Damn you, Tony! I hate you, you bastard!" With those words, she walked out of the room sobbing. It was the first time she'd ever swore at me, and the first time she'd made a derogatory remark about my heritage. The Dutch in her had finally broken free. We had two boys, Terry and Rick, who shared a room with a bunk bed. The third bedroom was the all-purpose bedroom. That's where I slept from that day forward. It was a rented house. We had over $60,000 set aside for a down payment on our dream house, but my dream had turned into a nightmare. Nothing more was said about the seminar. Marcy no longer worked overtime. She carried her lunch to work. The atmosphere at home was not chilly, more like cold and icy. Mom wasn't getting any new feedback from her church friends. Things seemed to be normalizing, but I felt uncomfortable. There was no sex at that point, but I wouldn't put up with that situation for long. Against my better judgment, I agreed to accompany Marcy to her company's Christmas party. I didn't want to let her go alone, and I felt I could have a quiet evening just out of her way. It was a good plan, but full of flaws. The company rented a room with a dance floor, a buffet, and a couple of open bars. I could drink 3 beers all evening and not feel any pain. By the time we got there, the only available tables were next to the big shots of the company. It was pretty obvious that all the employees were avoiding these places. For the first hour, everything seemed to be fine. I noticed Rodney at the other end of the room chatting with his buddies. A few of the guys Marcy worked with asked her to dance, but good old Rodney kept to himself. I was glad I let her dance because I didn't want to dance myself. I was just starting on my 3rd beer when I noticed Marcy and Rodney exchanging glances. It was mostly nods and head tilts, but something was definitely going on. I tried my best to feign boredom and disinterest, but I kept my eyes on them. My wife had excused herself to use the ladies' room. I took a quick look around the room and noticed Rodney was gone. It was unbelievable. After we discussed it at home, I realized that it was completely stupid of her to try to meet the jerk while I was in the same building. She could see him anytime she wanted at work, with no chance of being interrupted. I figured the only reason for this was to make me look like a cuckold. By having an affair with Rodney in the middle of a workplace romance, she'd put the horns on me for all to see. His cronies were standing together outside one of the bars with wide grins on their faces when Marcy stepped into the hallway leading to the restrooms. She looked back to make sure I was still in my seat and then disappeared. On my way to the restrooms, I stopped at the head table. I leaned over to them and apologized for disrupting the party just to get their attention. The guys at the other end of the hall with the goofy grins suddenly stopped smiling. They looked worried because they didn't know how they could help good old Rodney. I went into the women's restroom first, but found it empty. I had better luck in the men's room. Things were happening in no time there. They were kissing. He was standing with his back to me, and his hand was slipped under her skirt. There was no resistance on her part. I grabbed Rodney by the neck and took a step to the side before crashing my head into the bathroom tile. Something had definitely broken. I could hear my wife screaming my name over and over, but I was completely oblivious to it. I turned the son of a bitch around, and blood from his broken nose splattered my shirt. He was limping but still on his feet, so I gave him a good shot in the stomach. He went down and immediately started vomiting. Marcy tugged at my jacket sleeve to no avail. The main hall was quiet as I dragged Rodney to the middle of the floor by his tie. I was probably choking him, but I didn't care. The orchestra had already stopped playing, and everyone was watching me throw him around. I looked around the hall to see if anyone wanted to come to his aid, but there were no willing participants. "I'm sorry for ruining your wonderful party. I have to go now, but I'm leaving my whore wife here for your entertainment. Drop her off at the house when you're done using her." Rodney was on his hands and knees trying to get up. His face was a bloody mess. Marcy stood in the doorway with her mouth open. It was hard to tell if she was upset about what I'd done to her lover or what I just said to all her coworkers. It didn't matter to me. I noticed Rodney standing right under the mistletoe, and I couldn't help myself. Before I left, I kicked him in the balls in such a way that he'd remember it for a week. He immediately fell forward, hitting his face on the floor again. That must have hurt. No one said a word. I called my mom from the car and asked her to stop by the house to pick up the boys. Going out of town for a few days seemed like a good idea, and I didn't want to leave the kids with their mother. I was sure she wouldn't be able to properly care for them. I made plans as I went along, having no idea what I was going to do or where I was going. My boss didn't mind giving me a vacation for a week or so. When I arrived, Mom and Dad were already there. After paying off the babysitter, I helped pack up the boys. My bag consisted of mostly socks and underwear, but I put a few shirts and pants in it just in case. Before I left, I pulled a box of money out of the basement rafters. Banks paid less than 1% interest on savings accounts, so I decided to keep the money at home. I know, it's silly to keep $62,000 in the house, but apparently that's what I inherited from my mom. She had a habit of keeping big stashes all over the kitchen. I was just about to turn off the lights when a cab pulled up and dropped Marcy off. She came in and sat down on the couch without saying anything. She looked more worried than angry, more frustrated than frightened. I told you there's only one rule. Don't humiliate me or my family in public. But you just couldn't resist doing it, could you? I waited a little while for her to cry and then headed out the door. It was a little after 9 when I pulled onto the Schuylkill Expressway. Damn. This party hadn't lasted very long, at least for me. I decided that I would spend a few days in Atlantic City before returning home, but first I needed to see my old friend Sal. Sal had a sandwich shop in the old neighborhood. It wasn't like the ones you see in Philly road trip movies, but rather served as a convenience for people who lived nearby. His main income came from other activities that most of us either ignored or participated in. He lived on the second floor and worked in the back room. It was like old home week. After I explained my situation to him, he agreed to help me. Tony, this is going to cost you $20. Can you handle it, or do you need me to back you up? I'll pay it forward. No problem. Do you want it dirty or quiet? Transparent. No fuss, no commotion, nothing. Do you need to go away for a few days? Have you prepared anything? No, I was thinking of going to Atlantic City. How about 6 days and 7 nights at the Taj? What are you talking about, Sal? I have some companions. I think it would be very profitable for you. Sounds good to me. You're going alone, Tony? Yes, it's all happening sort of on its own. I haven't had time to invite guests. You don't have to be alone. You need someone to confirm you were there. Just give me a minute. Sal picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Carla, it's Sal. Make yourself pretty and get your ass over here. A short pause followed. No, it's nothing like that. You're going on vacation. He chuckled as he hung up the phone. Tony, you remember Carla, my brother Michael's oldest? Yes, the chubby little girl with the dark brown eyes. I remember she was always laughing. How old is she now? Sal smiled at my recollection of his niece. She's 23 now, Tony, and she's not chubby anymore. Suddenly I realized that Carla would be accompanying me to the beach. I felt a little awkward since she was Sal's niece, but hell, he was the one who had arranged it. Tony, do you have a credit card? I have 2. I was going to cancel them Monday morning. No, don't do that. I want you to use those credit cards as much as possible. Food, room service, and even some casino advances, but don't go overboard. You need card activity to prove you were there. Spread them out over time so it doesn't feel like you're sneaking back home. It might cost you a couple $1,000, but it's cheap insurance. Sal knew his business. It all made sense. While I was thinking it over, Carla walked in. Tony, I haven't seen you since you moved to the village. You look good. Now I understood why Sal was smiling. Carla was simply gorgeous. Those dark eyes were stunning, and all the baby fat she used to have seemed to have moved to her breasts. Jumping to my feet, I tipped my chair over as if clumsy. Tony needs someone to keep him company in Atlantic City for a few days. Would you agree? Her mood seemed to change slightly when he said that. Aren't you married yet? She addressed the question to me. Before I could answer, Sal stepped into the conversation. The marriage is dead, Carla. Tony needs a nurse right now. I knew you always liked him. That's why I thought of you first. Sal, I'm not going to ruin anyone's family. It's not fair for you to ask me to do that. Besides, I'm not one of your prostitutes. Why don't you just get one of the girls to go with him? I don't expect you to sleep with him. I'll just keep him company and help him forget his troubles. A puzzled expression appeared on Carla's face, as if she had just guessed something. Not only was she beautiful, but she was fast. I'm sorry. She shifted her gaze from Sal to me and smiled slightly. I'd love to go with you, Tony, but you have to promise to buy me saltwater taffy. Now we were all smiling. It'll take me about an hour to get ready. Don't give him anything to drink, Sal. I don't want to go there with a drunk. I think I saw her wink at me as she left to get her things. Sal and I recounted our conversation while Carla was gone. He graciously accepted my $20,000 and promised full satisfaction. The trip to Atlantic City went without incident, except for the fact that I was forced to tell Carla about the problems I was having with Marcy. Her only comment was, "Oh, the poor kids." Carla frowned when she saw the double beds, but thankfully didn't notice my slight giggle. I was sure we would only be using one of them for the rest of the week. All good things come with time. We gambled a bit, but not overly so. I had enough sense to realize that I was always going to lose in the end. Carla was content with the quarter slots, and I was just looking for something to kill time with. We spent more time eating and walking along the waterfront than anything else. Of course, we attended every show in town. The first night I was the perfect gentleman, but by noon on the second day, Carla and I were already tearing up the sheets. My mom was right. I should have married an Italian woman. It felt natural, and I didn't feel like I was cheating. On the fourth day, we were getting ready for dinner when we had guests over. There were two of them, not in suits, but in sports jackets. Tony Randazzo, I'm Ray Fritz, and this is my partner Rupert Marks. We're with the Berks County Major Crimes Unit. Can we talk to you for a few minutes? Carla came out of the bathroom in her bra and panties. She looked back at the two men, walked over to the bed and picked up her robe. She looked a little embarrassed, but she knew they might pay me a visit. Would you like to let me know what we're going to talk about? We'd like to talk about your relationship with Rodney Foote. I didn't have a relationship with Rodney Foote. My wife did. For some reason, they felt a little awkward. Fritz was making conversation, and Rupert was busy looking at Carla. We understand that, Mr. Randazzo. We understand that you spoke to him last Friday at the Continental Insurance Christmas party. Why? Is he pressing charges? No, he's disappeared, and we were wondering if you could help us find him. Gentlemen, before we discuss this any further, I'd like someone from the Atlantic City Police Department here, and I don't mean the blue suit. If you can't arrange that, I need a lawyer. My lawyer from Reading. My visitors didn't react in any way. Carla, get dressed. We're about to have dinner. Sorry, guys, but we have reservations for 6 o'clock. The steaks at Safari are fabulous. I'll probably go home this Friday. Would you like me to come over and talk to you then? They looked a little dumbfounded. What makes you think something happened to that underdog? Maybe he just left town for a while? I asked. He was picked up by a cab leaving the community hospital on Sunday morning, and no one has seen him since. Carla had already finished getting dressed, and I was pulling on my jacket. Well, I've been here since Friday night, and you can check with the hotel staff. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're going to have a couple steaks. Do you have any other questions? Yes, but they'll have to wait until Friday. We expect to see you then. I just nodded at them and gently guided them toward the door. We all took the elevator down together and didn't talk about anything else. Once we were in the lobby, they went to hotel security and we went to the Safari. By the time I got home, Terry and Rick were already making a big fuss over me. The saltwater taffy made everything even better. Marcy, on the other hand, was a little cold. It was clear she didn't understand what was wanted of her. After talking to the police, I spent the rest of the day with the boys and planned to talk to Marcy in the evening. The boys settled down for the night in front of the TV, and I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Marcy to finish cleaning up. It seemed to take her longer than usual, but I didn't back down. Finally, she turned to me and sat down, resting her elbows on the ceramic countertop. What did you do to Rodney? She wasn't angry or demanding, but she seemed genuinely concerned. She looked at me when she said it, and then looked around the room, waiting for an answer. I've been in Atlantic City all week. I haven't seen Rodney since the party. You heard him. I hope so. He was in the hospital for 2 days. You broke his jaw and nose. He deserved it. She seemed to run out of questions. What were you doing with him in the men's room? I waited a few moments, but got no answer. Why did he put his hand up your skirt? Still, no answer. Marcy clenched her hands and stared at the countertop. Why aren't you at work? And then what are the kids doing home on a school day? I had to quit my job. There was no way I could go back there again. I took the boys out of school because your mom said you could be home today. It was time for a confrontation. I told you there's only one rule. You can't do anything to humiliate me or my family. It's a simple rule. Why did you decide to ruin everything by breaking it? You two just decided you needed to do it. Why? Marcy seemed to get more and more nervous the longer we sat there. I slammed my fist down hard on the tabletop. I said, why? God damn it, answer me. I don't know why. It just happened that way. You were sitting in the corner like a lost puppy, and we thought we could take advantage of the situation. We had no idea you'd go crazy. You were acting like a crazy person. I was scared to death. At least I managed to draw some emotion out of her. Of course, none of it made sense. I didn't even bother to analyze her words. It was stupid what they'd done while I was there. They had weeks to get together before the party, and I would never know about it. No, the only reason they chose that time and that place was to humiliate me. All her gibberish wouldn't change that. Marcy, you have 3 choices. You can stay here and be a decent mother to your children. You can get a divorce and leave without your children, or you can just disappear. If you stay, we won't live as husband and wife, and I won't tolerate any more affairs with Rodney or anyone else. At the mention of Rodney's name, Marcy burst into tears. Before she could make a choice, she ran out of the room, sobbing. I think we'll finish this conversation tomorrow. I had to make some adjustments. I rented a small apartment a few blocks from the house. It was close enough that the boys could go there anytime they wanted. Carla moved in with me. The police talked to me a few more times and then stopped bothering me. Rodney Foote was picked up by a cab outside the hospital and was never seen again. His family offered a reward for any information, but there was no response. I had dinner with Marcy and the boys every night and spent as much time as possible with my sons on weekends. It was obvious to everyone that Marcy and I were no longer a couple, although we remained married. Marcy spent a lot of time with her parents and sister. I had no problem with that. There was nothing to indicate that she was seeing anyone else. She quit her job right after the Christmas party and didn't seem interested in finding someone else. We never finished the conversation we had the first night I got home. She played the part of a good mother. The house was always clean, the boys were always well fed, and they had clean clothes. I took care of all the lawn and outside work. Marcy received $200 each week to pay for household expenses, food, and personal needs. I always asked her if she wanted more, but she always said no. We no longer had credit cards. At Thanksgiving and Christmas, the boys and I were with my family. Carla usually joined us. Marcy spent the holidays with her family, but Christmas Eve was spent with the boys. Awkwardness arose whenever Terry or Rick wanted to talk about the relationship between their mother and me. We both refused to discuss it with them. I appreciated that on her part, but then what could she say? This farce went on for years. Of course, my meager explanation doesn't even come close to conveying what was really going on. There were constant difficulties and disagreements, but we were winning. Carla and I were doing well at first. As time went on, she started spending more time with her family in Philadelphia and less time with me. I couldn't blame her. I owed her a debt of gratitude for all the efforts she had made to make the breakup easier to bear. As things stood, I couldn't divorce Marcy, and as long as the boys stayed home, I couldn't kick her out of the house. These were all self-restraints, but I forced myself to stick to them. I hated the whole situation, but I couldn't think of an alternative. The boys, on the other hand, could. Terry was 16 when things came to a head. A new student at school was a relative of my wife's former lover, and he persistently pestered Terry about the situation. It was the first time such a thing had come up, and he was unprepared for it. Rodney's nephew ended up in the hospital, and I had to pick Terry up from school. He was expelled from school for 2 weeks and was facing an assault charge. Unfortunately, Rick was present when everything went to hell and insisted on trying to help his brother. He ended up losing 2 teeth, but earned his brother's admiration for the attempt. Marcy met us at the door when I brought her sons home. Terry immediately began berating his mother for not telling them about what had happened years ago. Marcy didn't get defensive. She just stood there and listened to her oldest son express his anger. I left them alone to take Rick to the dentist. Rick didn't seem too upset about his missing teeth, but I wasn't thrilled about the upcoming dental expenses. When we got home, Marcy was gone. Her car was still parked there, but that was the end of it. Terry said she just grabbed her purse and left. She didn't say a word to him or offer an explanation. I took a week's vacation from work to straighten things out. Marcy's parents and sister refused to even talk to me. After a week, I still had no idea where she was or what her intentions were. Carla and I moved into the house. The fact that we had to sleep in the same bed was uncomfortable at first, but the boys took it much easier than I had anticipated. One day while I was at work, everything in the house that belonged to Marcy or was related to Marcy disappeared. I had no idea what Carla did with it and never asked. Carla took over all the chores that Marcy had been doing. I bought her some credit cards to make life easier. It was strange that I trusted my mistress more than my wife. I sold Marcy's car and bought a new one for Carla. With the new order of things, family gatherings became much less stressful. Carla was much happier and my mother was thrilled. Terry and Rick were no longer having problems at school and my nephew Rodney never came back. Things were finally looking up, but I was still married. I waited 2 months before I went to the police and reported Marcy missing. I actually just reported her as a runaway spouse so I could use that report when I filed for divorce, using abandonment as the reason. I waited another 2 months and then filed the divorce papers. She had to be absent for a year for the divorce to be granted. I had planned everything in advance. Things normalized in the family. Terry and Rick had no problem accepting Carla. They never called her mom, always Carla, but it was okay. We were more like a family than we had been in years. Then one day, out of the blue, came my final decision to divorce. I was a free man. 2 weeks later, Carla and I drove to Elkton and tied the knot. We were a family again. Terry graduated from high school and joined the Air Force. A year later, Rick decided to go to meat cutting school in Toledo. Everything was happening so fast. Soon, Carla and I were alone. We hadn't heard from Marcy. Mom and Dad moved to Ocala and made everyone promise to visit us at least twice a year. Nothing else kept us in Reading, and Carla and I moved back home to Philadelphia. After graduation, Rick got a job at a fancy butcher store in West Chester. We saw him a few times a month, and he always had something delicious to surprise us. About a year later, one of Carla's nieces was getting married, and we naturally had to go. An Italian wedding in the city of brotherly love is a big deal. By big, we mean it's attended by a lot of people, mostly relatives, and a lot of freeloaders looking for booze and free food. But it didn't matter because there was plenty of everything. We were sitting with friends enjoying the evening when I noticed that Carla seemed a little nervous. Several times I noticed her looking across the dance floor as if she was staring at something. I cast a few quick glances and saw nothing. I forgot about it until my wife excused herself to the ladies' room. Something didn't seem right to me. I saw her walk to the end of the hall and meet up with one of her old friends. They chatted a lot and posed a bit, but it all seemed quite proper. Carla didn't go to the break room, but approached one of Sal's personal assistants. Carla gestured to the table her friend had just come from. There were 3 guys and 3 girls sitting at the table. They looked like galoots trying to be something they weren't. The girls were dressed a little too dressy and looked lecherous. Carla returned with a thoughtful but confident expression on her face. "Tony, we have a bit of a problem. I figured it out from your going around the room. Why don't you explain it to me?" "You have to stay calm. In a couple minutes, one of the guys at Gina's table is going to come in here and shoot you." "What the hell does baiting mean?" "He's going to say some insulting things about me to piss you off. When you come out to fight him, the 3 of them are going to beat the shit out of you." "And what am I supposed to do? Let him get away with it?" "Play along with him, at least until Bobby V and the boys get into position. You might have to deal with one of them, but that'll be the worst of it. What do you mean by play along with him? Let him insult me, and then agree with him. If he says I'm a whore, ask him how much he's willing to pay, something like that. Whatever you do, don't let him stir you up. What did all this happen because of? What did I do to these guys? Look at Gina's table. Yeah? See the bitch with the short platinum hair? Yeah? Look closely. Oh, shit! That's Marcy. What the hell is Marcy doing here? Marcy's boyfriend is somehow involved with the fiancé. Looks like she's still pissed at you and set him up to clean your clock when she realized you were here. Guess she's looking for payback. While you and Sal's boys take care of business here, Gina and I will talk to Marcy in the ladies' room. It's not going to be pretty. I didn't like the way things were going. This was a wedding. The young bride would remember this evening for the rest of her life. It wouldn't be fair for a couple of thugs to ruin it for her. 10 minutes later, I noticed the guy who was with Marcy get up from his chair. I stood up and apologized to everyone at the table. Carla threw me a strange look, but seemed to understand. I nonchalantly walked over to the side fire exit where everyone went out to smoke. The guy made a gesture with his head and the other two guys got up to follow him. But what they didn't notice was that behind them, coming from the back of the bar, were 3 guys with Louisville sluggers that they kept behind the bar. About 6 guys were smoking by the fire exit. When I told them to get out, they left without any protest. Apparently, there was a sense of urgency in my voice. I walked about 20 steps from the door, stopped, and turned around. They walked out, smiling, but not for long. A few seconds later, they heard the door close behind them. The smiles disappeared when they turned around and saw 3 guys with bats and the father of the bride. It was over in less than 30 seconds. I never raised my hand. I apologize for any inconvenience I caused you or your family on this special evening. I felt like a character from The Godfather. Thank you for having the decency to take it outside. He shook my hand and turned back to his daughter. I thanked Sal's boys for their help and went to find Carla. They stayed behind to clean up. I felt it was time to leave. Carla wasn't around and the table where Marcy was sitting was empty. Rick was there with a few of his friends and had heard about the commotion. He found me at the bar getting a fresh drink. Dad, what the hell is going on? My first impulse was to bite my tongue and say nothing, but that didn't work. Your mother was here with her new boyfriend. I don't need to know anything more than that? He smiled, turned to the bartender, and asked for a beer. We sat and talked about other things for about an hour. Finally, Carla showed up, looking a little disheveled. Where have you been? She gave me a sly smile. Gina and I had to take your ex-wife to the hospital. She wasn't feeling well. Rick and I couldn't keep from laughing. Tony, can we go home now? It was a long night, but a lot of fun. We never saw Marcy again. Carla and I are still together in the old neighborhood. Life is great.